When we were young, we read more often because we had to. It was the only way for us to get knowledge and to be enlightened. Read to your heart's delight and be enlightened. Let's just read. It's a podcast by Andy's Personal Development. Stay tuned for more reading and enlightenment.
Okay, great. So now we are live on Let's Just Read. And this is Andy of Andy's Personal Development. And our special guest on this episode is Jill Ammon Vanderwood. And she's an award-winning author and speaker from Southeastern Idaho. There is so much more to Jill's fascinating story, but we're going to welcome her to the podcast on Let's Just Read, and she will introduce herself to our audience. Jill, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm great. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us and to come on our program. So, Jill, what we want to begin with is by asking you, how was it for you before you actually began writing? Because you didn't start until late, right?
Yes, I was in my 50s when I published my first book.
Right, and that is an unusual thing, but then you went on to write 14 books.
That's far, yes.
Wow, and you have the desire to write more. You have the desire to.
I do.
All right, great. So how was it for you before that period of time in your 50s where you began writing? What was that experience like for you that led you up to making the decision to begin to write?
Well, I already had grandchildren, so I started telling stories to my grandchildren before they went to bed at my house, and I was making up stories with their names in them, and it ended up being my first book, Through the Rug.
Okay.
And Through the Rug became a series of 3 books about a grandmother and her grandchildren going on adventures.
Oh, okay. So was that part of what you had actually experienced with your family?
Well, the grandmother's doing magic, so I don't really do magic, but we have a lot of fun.
So what would you say would be the focal point of the inspiration, and what was the message that you wanted those who read that to get through your writing?
Well, so the first series was more like spend as much time as you can with those you love and have as much fun as you can have. That's basically it.
Yeah, and Jill, that's a wonderful message, and we thank you for that.
I can't hear you, sorry.
All right, hold on. Can you hear me now?
It's my internet, I think.
Yeah. Can you hear me now, Jill?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. What I was about to say is that you seem to have a penchant and maybe an affinity towards family life and children. Am I getting that right? Because when I look at your writings, I can see that your focus is there. What is the main reason for that?
Probably because I am the 3rd out of 11 children. So I was watching children since I was probably 6, and I just have a thing for children. I wanted to be a mother really bad, and I have 4 children, and now I have 9 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. So family is everything to me.
Yeah, family is extremely important. I agree with you with that 100% and more. So I want to look at some of your publications, and I'm looking like from forward going back. You have a publication that deals with gun violence, which is a current issue that has been plaguing many nations, not just North American nations, for a while. And of course, the children would be negatively impacted and affected by what is happening with regards to that. what is the message you are saying through that publication, Jill? And how much of it you think is important with regards to what is happening now in our world with regards to the children being affected?
Well, one of the main points I'm making is that parents, if they have guns, they should lock them up, not let the children get a hold of them so easily. And in the story, the main character is the reader, and the reader has choices to make. So when the friend shows him a loaded gun, will he want to turn to shoot that gun with his friends, or will he tell somebody, or will he just say, excuse himself and get out of there?
Okay.
So it's to go step by step in the process of thinking it through.
Right.
Making choices so that if those choices ever come, you will know what you're going to do and you will know how to handle it. And you should probably tell somebody, because usually somebody that has a gun, who's been bullied, who wants to shoot something, will tell somebody. So if you know that, you should make that known to authorities or somebody.
Yeah, great. I hear you and I fully support you. And so we're speaking about off target, and Jill actually won a Mom's Choice Award as the author of this publication, Off Target. How did you feel as you were presented with that award, Jill? What sense of satisfaction did that bring for you?
It made me realize that I was on the right track or the right target with that book, and that people were seeing that that was a necessary topic to cover, even though it's a difficult one to cover. And nobody has really come against me, thank heaven, because
Yes.
I'm not saying that people shouldn't have guns. I just don't think they should be in the hands of children.
Okay.
Without, they can be in the hands of children with supervision.
Yeah, I understand. So, Jill, what was it like doing the research for Off Target, and how challenging was it for you to get that proper information that you feel would sort of resonate with the people that were going to be reading the publication?
Well, you can find almost anything on the internet, and then you can also contact people. So I contacted lawyers. I contacted people that had written something about guns and asked their opinion. I read a book about it, and I even went in and took gun safety. I took, what do you call it? Conceal and carry class, so I could get more information. And I went to the gun counter and I had them show me different kinds of guns that women maybe would have in their nightstand. And, I had to make it more hands-on, because I don't have as much experience with that as some people might. And then I also decided to study the school shootings and what kind of things might lead up to that. Maybe bullying, maybe somebody that plays too many video games, and somebody that really has already told somebody, I want to shoot.
Okay, great. That's really interesting, Jill, and I must commend you, because it seems as though you would have done what I would describe as a holistic amount of research, and really find yourself in a position where you can sound like an authority on the subject. So I commend you for that. I'm looking at the Part You Choose series on the rocks. What was the inspiration, Jill, behind that particular series, the Path You Choose series, and tell us a bit about it?
So the Path You Choose series, the first one was the Off Target, and then the second one was On the Rocks. The third one is Cheers. So On the Rocks and Cheers are both about underage drinking, and On the Rocks is written from a boy's point of view, and Cheers is written from the girl's point of view, because at the age of maybe 9 to 13, 14, you're really more influenced by your own gender than you are. I mean, you might have a crush on a boy if you're a girl, or a boy like girls, but their friends are going to influence them more. And so I have it like an older brother or sister is influencing them, somebody older, because I did a survey several years ago when I was writing a book about drugs, and I asked kids in 6th grade and also in high school in the same areas. One was Philadelphia, I think one was in Utah. And so I asked the kids who influenced them for drugs, who's pressuring them the most, who are they most likely to listen to if someone tries to give them drugs, and it's usually an older sibling.
Yeah.
That's why I chose the older sibling to be the influence. And they still have to make choices. Am I going to take a drink from a friend? Am I going to go to a party with my older brother? Am I going to get into a car with a drunk driver, even though he says, oh, I'm not that drunk?
Yeah.
You know, so they have all those choices. And in my books, I'm not sugarcoating it. I'm actually telling what could happen if you are in a car with a drunk driver.
Yeah.
And what can happen if you're at a party and there's a girl that passes out, and everybody is more worried about themselves getting out of there before they get in trouble than taking care of this girl. So the reader has a choice. Are they going to get out of there like their brother's telling them to do? Or are they going to stay and call 911? And that sort of choices.
Wow, I love it. I think you're bringing a new heightened sense of awareness to people taking responsibility for their actions and understanding how important that is in the world that we live today. And even being a bit empathetic and just placing yourself in someone else's shoes and saying, well, if it were you, what would you expect other folks to do? You know, so I really commend you for that as well. I want to look at this other publication, and it's entitled Drugs Make You Un-Smarter. Tell us a bit about that, Jill.
So that was my granddaughter's idea. She was 15 at the time, and she had a father who was in prison for a drug addiction. And her mother was a drinker, and, you know, she was just surrounded by that sort of thing. So she decided not to do drugs. And she joined a group of other kids that weren't doing drugs. And she was telling her story in the beginning of the book about how the drugs were all around her. People were asking her to do drugs, and even in her own home.
Wow.
So she had an older sister, and when the mom worked at night, the sister was having parties, and she would feel responsible. She'd have to clean up the mess after they were drinking because she didn't want to get everybody in trouble. And it was just a lot of things going on in her own home. And her little sister found something on the counter one morning. The sister was probably 7, and Savannah was probably 6th grade, maybe. And she had classes at school about drugs. And the little sister picks this thing up, and it's colorful. And she says, "Can I have this candy?" And her sister dove at her and grabbed that and threw it down the toilet. And she said, no, it was ecstasy.
Yeah.
So the sister almost took that in her own home, the little one. And so we wrote that book based on her story and what happened with her father and what her choices were and how she was telling other teenagers not to do it. And then we interviewed a lot of people who had problems with almost every type of drug, and told their stories in there too.
Okay, Savannah Peterson. Wow, what an amazing story. Hats off to Savannah for taking that very brave step and coming forward and, you know, coming to the point where to produce a publication that would help people understand some of the struggles that she would have faced and how that information in a valuable form could help them as well to overcome similar struggles. So in terms of the future, Jill, what are your projections like? Are there any in the works publications or sequels to what you have done before, any follow-ups to any current work, or are there going to be some new projects coming on the horizon? What are we to look forward to from Jill Vanderwood in the future?
So it's actually the 14th book that's coming out next month.
Huh?
And it's called Keeping Secrets.
Okay.
And it's also the path you choose type book. So the girls are at a slumber party and they decide to play a game where they tell their deepest secrets.
Mm.
And the reason I'm doing it that way is because there's a lot of issues. This is a book for girls, and there's issues with inappropriate touching from a relative. There's divorce issues. There's drug issues. There's a girl who witnesses her brother having a hit and run accident, and she doesn't know whether to get the brother in trouble or what to do. And they discuss these with their friends, and there's other issues in there too, a lot of them. So as they discuss them, the friends are giving suggestions, but they've already sworn themselves to secrecy, so they can't tell. And then the issue is, when is it right to tell even though you promised? Is it worth the friendship if somebody dies because they're suicidal? You know, should you tell or should you keep a secret no matter what? And then it also goes into issues where there are people that are safe to tell, like your minister, priest, they're allowed to keep confidentiality. A lawyer, a doctor, but a counselor, unless they're a psychiatrist or they're a doctor, they will have to tell on certain things. They're obligated, so they can at least direct you to what to do, but they can't actually keep your secret. And then a doctor was one of them too. So it's telling them to tell somebody, tell your parent, tell somebody you feel safe with if you have something you're trying to keep secret, because it could be dangerous. Wow. And I have other books probably in that series coming up too, so probably 3 or 4 more.
Okay, great. So what I'm looking at, Jill, is the level of passion that you're putting out there with regards to children and the responsibilities that they even have in addition to their parents. What are some of the things that you want the parents to take notice of, to be cognizant of, and to be like sort of proactive and ensure that they do these things so that their children are guided properly, maybe even by an example of a better lifestyle, healthier choices, because you speak a lot about choices. What are some of the things that you would like to see parents doing in this manner so that it creates an atmosphere in the home, if they go out, certain places, family picnics and stuff, how they should behave, how they should care about themselves, so that parents would know that there's a role that they can play too in helping the family stay more contained and at least be able to make better choices that would bring about better results.
I would like to see maybe the book read with the young people and their parents, and then the parents could help them discuss that choice. But I think some families probably do have secrets, So if some of those things are going on in the home, maybe it might help them be aware of it, but maybe they won't want that to come out. So, but the kids need to know that they have protection, that they can get help. I just talked to a woman after I wrote Keeping Secrets, and I was telling her about the book, and she said, "Oh, I have a secret and I will never tell. It will go to my grave with me."
Wow.
I said, "Oh, that's scary." And as we got talking, it was a child molestation thing, and she wasn't going to tell anybody, even though she was in her 70s. So if they can get that out, and get some help for that family, that whole family or whoever's doing it, or a neighbor or whoever, it can get them some healing.
Yeah, I commend you for that, Jill. I understand, and I see the need for it as well. It's very important that we have that kind of communication going, that people understand that, hey, there are some things that you just have to speak about. You have to say something, do something. Yeah, it's tough. So earlier on when we spoke, Jill, you made reference to being able to get into the schools and to do some projects with the children in the schools, mostly that they would have hands-on experience with the information written in some of your books. What brought that idea on, and do you see anything in the making that it can possibly happen?
Well, I have visited schools, and I have done in school assemblies to where they had me do 3 assemblies, one for, I think it was 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade separately. And that time I was talking about bullying. And then I do some hands-on things, and kids come up to me and say, I was bullied. And I'm so glad you shared that information, you know. So I want to get my books into the schools so that maybe they can say there's 13 endings in the book. They could divide into 13 groups, and each group would read one section, which would only be maybe 4 or 5 pages, or not too many pages to get the whole story. So, and then at the end, they could discuss, have one person speak up and tell the whole group what they learned from that part of the story. And then each, if each person had a copy of the book, then they could go home and read the rest. And if they decided to do that with the ebook, it's only $3.99. So most families could afford $3.99. And then the people that couldn't afford that, I could give a copy, like a PDF copy, to the librarian, and she could make sure that those people got a copy. That's how I'd like to do it, or have a sponsor who would provide books for each student.
Wow. I commend you for that, Jill. That's a really important message in terms of you sort of giving back. How do we get people on the whole to understand that it is extremely important to have a desire to read, so that at least we could get information, and the term that we use through this podcast is enlightenment. Being able to know something that you did not know before, and you can embody it, and it sets you in a path where you can have a new experience. How do we encourage folks, young and old, to find a way to get more time just to read so that they can get information that would help them? How do we do that?
I'm not sure, but with my Path You Choose books, you don't have to read the whole book. You read maybe at the beginning, there's maybe 3 or 4 pages that lead you in, and then you make a choice of which story you're going to read, and you're finished with that story maybe by 15 pages. Okay. So the reason I'm doing that, and there's pictures in there too. So if you read it that way, you can come back later and read another story, but you can feel like you've finished something after so many pages, and it's not that many. Wow. So I think that could encourage a reluctant reader to read something.
That's interesting. I like that angle. So it says here that you have taught workshops for writers, and you also a keynote speaker for the League of Utah Writers. Tell us a bit about that, Jill.
Well, after I wrote a book called Shaking Behind the Microphone, Overcoming the Fear of Public Speaking. And after I wrote that book, they wanted me to speak to the whole writing group. So at a conference, I was one of the keynote speakers, and talked to them about, if you're a writer, you should also be a speaker, and how I overcame that. And I also had interviewed a lot of people on how they overcame public speaking fears. And so I put all their stories together, and I teach workshops to other writers quite a bit. And that's the first time I realized how much afraid I was, how scared I was. So that experience helped me to overcome it, because I was in a group speaking and doing a workshop on marketing, and I had just barely written my first book, and I had 6 months to prepare. So I went to the what they call Toastmasters and learned some speaking skills. And then I went into the class, and everybody told me, you're only going to have 2 or 3 in your workshop. So I thought, okay, I have my friend, her mother, and my sister-in-law. I'll be great. And then I had a lump in my throat, so I took an allergy pill, whole one, and then it made my mouth so dry that my lip was sticking to my teeth, and I had to keep drinking water. And then all my notes fell on the floor, so I couldn't find where I was. And then I just kept going, and I went for an hour. And then the thing that happened was, when I first got into the class, the room started filling up. I didn't just have 3 people. I had the whole room, and there were so many people that they were standing on the sides. And when I went, gulp, oh no, but I did it. And after doing that, even though I was shaky and scared and I lost my notes, I felt so invigorated because I had done it. I accomplished that, and it was hard, but I did it. And somebody told me afterwards, you seemed a little scared at first, but after a while you did just fine. Even though I thought I was still scared.
Yeah,
So
that's
every time after that was better, every time.
what. That's a wonderful story. I thank you so much for sharing. Jill, we have come just about to the end of this wonderful episode, and I want you to tell people how they can get in contact with you, need you any public speaking, or they need you to do any workshops with your books, or they need to get your books. Tell them how they can make contact with you. I also will make available your website and your other social handles, hashtags available when an episode that is edited of this podcast goes out, so that they will know exactly where to go and find you, find your books and so on. But tell them now, let them know.
Okay, so I have a website that's jillvanderwood.com. And it has information. It also has media information, other interviews I've done, and each book that's on the page of my website, you click on that book and it'll open up to a new page. So, and I have a new book coming out that I told you that's coming out soon. So we'll be putting that up on the website very soon too.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Jill Ammon Vanderwood, for being on Let's Just Read. It has been a wonderful time sharing with Jill. You heard her passion, you heard her voice, her concerns for children who are being bullied, setting wrong examples when they see things happening from their siblings and elder adults in the home, how that can have a negative impact and effect on them, and the choices that they can make about life in terms of their habits and who they hang out with, not going into a vehicle with someone who is under the influence of alcohol and stuff like that. So much valuable content Jill has shared with us today. So until next time, this is Andy from Andy's Personal Development on Let's Just Read with our guest, Jill Vanderwood, saying, please continue to read and seek information so that you can get knowledge and enlightenment. It can make a world of difference in your life. So until next time, I'm saying to you, so long, goodbye, God bless, shalom, namaste. Bye for now, folks.
Thank you.